Have you ever noticed the silence between two footsteps? Not the steps themselves, but the space between. That quiet pause, that tiny moment where nothing happens, and yet, everything is still moving. Sometimes, life becomes so loud that we forget the value of what isn't there. We chase the next sound, the next thing, the next answer. But what if the answer is in the space? In the pause between thoughts? In the empty chair beside you? In the quiet morning before the world begins? There is a word in Japanese, ma. It doesn't mean emptiness. It means presence and absence. It means the space that makes everything else matter. Not the notes, but the silence that gives the melody breath. Not the furniture, but the space that lets the room breathe. Not the words, but the silence between them. So maybe, it's not what we fill our lives with. Maybe it's what we leave open, that makes life feel whole. And maybe that's where we begin today. With a little more room, to simply be. 1. The space between things. There's a room I once sat in, where almost nothing existed. No paintings on the wall. No cluttered shelves. Just a single window, a low wooden bench, and a quiet hush that filled the air like a soft fog. It wasn't sterile. It wasn't cold. It felt alive in a way I couldn't explain. That space, that emptiness, wasn't empty at all. It was breathing. In Japanese design, space is not an afterthought. It is not what remains after the decorating is done. It is the heart of the room itself. Ma is the space between things. The quiet margin. The pause between notes. The room between furniture that lets you breathe. In a culture that often celebrates more things, more decoration, more color, Ma reminds us of what happens when we allow less. Because less isn't about deprivation. It's about intention. A cluttered room can feel like a cluttered mind. But one empty corner can become an invitation. To sit. To slow down. To listen. The space between things isn't a void. It's presence made visible. When a table holds only one vase with one flower, suddenly that flower becomes everything. Its color breathes into the room. Its form becomes sacred. Too much, and we stop noticing. Too much, and we stop feeling. So look around you. Does every surface speak, or is there space for silence? Do your things compete for attention? Or is there room for rest? Maybe the room doesn't need more beauty. Maybe it just needs more space for the beauty already there to be seen. And maybe, that space is waiting for you. 2. Noise outside, noise within. Some mornings before the sun has risen, the world is still. No cars. No notifications. No demands. Just the sound of breath, and maybe a bird far off calling from the trees. But those mornings are rare. Most days the world begins before we do. The phone buzzes. The inbox fills. The outside speaks so loudly, we forget there is an inside at all. We are taught to declutter our homes, to clear out our closets, to organize our shelves. But what about the noise we carry inside? The conversations we keep repeating. The to-do lists playing on loop. The self-judgments whispered so often, we stop noticing they're even there. In Japanese culture, the idea of ma doesn't stop at space between objects. It includes the space between thoughts. That subtle pause. Between hearing and reacting. Between feeling and speaking. Between doing and simply being. We chase silence in our homes, but forget to seek silence in ourselves. A tidy room with a noisy mind still feels chaotic. So maybe the real decluttering begins not with a drawer, but with a single breath. Close your eyes. Can you feel the noise inside you? Not to judge it, not to fix it, just to notice. Because noticing is the first form of silence. And when you let yourself sit quietly, in the space between thoughts, you might discover something unexpected. A stillness that was never missing, only hidden beneath the noise. So the next time the world feels too loud, ask gently, have I cleared a space for my mind to rest? Or am I still carrying the noise, even in the quiet? 3. Mind your schedule. The calendar looks full again. Meetings, appointments, errands back to back. Even rest becomes a checkbox. Yoga, 6:30. Dinner with self, 7:15. Sleep, if time allows. We are busy, even when we're not. But there's a quiet practice in Japan that doesn't ask you to do more. It asks you to do nothing. To leave a space in the day completely untouched. No plans. No screens. No goal. Just the space between doing. In Western culture, an empty block in the schedule feels like a problem. Something must fill it. A task. A call. A scroll through something. But in Japanese simplicity, that space is the breath of the day. A still pool, between rivers of motion. Have you ever tried to protect 1 hour and give it no assignment? Not for productivity, Not even for recovery. Just for being. Sit in a chair. Look at the way the shadow moves across the floor. Watch your tea grow cold. Let silence stretch, longer than it needs to. You may find the hour isn't empty. You are. Empty of urgency. Empty of performance. Empty of noise. And in that emptiness, something returns. A small pulse. A forgotten rhythm. Yourself. We plan to achieve. We plan to improve. But what if you planned for nothing? And discovered everything? Maybe it's not about finding time. Maybe it's about making space for time to find you. Have you ever scheduled nothing? And let it be sacred? 4. The beauty of pause. A note is not music by itself. It's the pause after the note that gives it meaning. In traditional Japanese music, silence is not an absence. It is an instrument. A deliberate space where breath enters. Where emotion gathers. Where the soul is allowed to feel. Ma lives in that pause. In haiku, just 17 syllables, there is always space left unspoken. A line that doesn't explain, but lets the reader linger in the in-between. The cherry blossoms fall. Not with noise, but in silence so delicate it becomes a poem. And in sumie painting, the brush dances with ink, but leaves white space untouched. Because what's not painted is just as important as what is. The viewer completes the meaning. In Western habits we often fill every page, every frame, every moment. More sound, more words, more color. But what if it's the lack that gives meaning? A pause in a conversation. A break between breaths. A blank wall that lets the light move freely. You don't always need to speak to be understood. You don't always need to act to be present. There's a gentle discipline in pausing. Not to wait for something better, but to simply honor the moment as it is. Let silence hold the space. Let the pause say what words cannot. Because sometimes the most beautiful thing is what is allowed to remain untouched. So when was the last time you let a moment simply be, without needing to explain it? 5. Emotional ma. There's a moment, so small it often goes unnoticed. It lives between the sharpness of a feeling and the first thing we do about it. Someone speaks. You feel hurt. The mind rushes ahead. To defend. To explain. To push back. But what if you didn't? What if, just for a breath, you let the space hold you? In Japanese wisdom, ma is not only the space between things. It is the space between impulse and response. Between what the heart feels and what the mouth says. That space is where grace can enter. A pause, not to suppress the feeling, but to allow it to settle. To see it clearly. To choose gently. When anger rises, do you react? Or do you breathe? When sadness appears, do you push it away? Or do you sit beside it quietly? We live in a world that rewards speed. Fast answers. Fast opinions. Fast emotions. But Ma invites you to slow down inside. To place a soft breath between the feeling and the doing. That breath is not weakness. It is clarity. You're not less alive because you pause. You're more awake because the moment you pause, you stop being controlled by the feeling and begin to understand it. Like a teacup filled to the brim, sometimes it is the stillness before drinking that gives the tea its warmth. So maybe next time your chest tightens, you let that small space expand. You let Ma in and ask gently, what happens if I don't rush to react? What lives in the silence? Between the heart's movement and the hand's response? 6. The room that breathes. There's a home I remember not because of what was in it, but because of what wasn't. No television. No cluttered corners. Just a wooden floor that creaked gently, a low table with one vase, and light spilling in like water from a quiet window. It felt like the room was breathing. Not in the way people do, but in the way air moves without being told. In the way silence feels alive when nothing is demanding it. In Japanese homes, ma isn't just in design. It's in the soul of the space. Not every wall needs to be filled. Not every surface needs to hold something. Because when a home has space, so do you. A clear path through a room can become a path through your own mind. A single object in view can feel like an anchor, reminding you that not all beauty comes from more. Sometimes, the presence of a chair in an empty room feels more comforting than an entire couch set, because it allows stillness to sit beside you. We often decorate to impress, to create interest, to fill voids we're not sure how to live with. But a home that breathes doesn't beg for attention. It invites presence. It holds you not by holding things, but by letting go of what doesn't belong. So walk through your home slowly. Does it breathe with you, or against you? Is there space to pause between rooms? Is there room for quiet to gather in corners? Maybe a home doesn't need more personality. Maybe it just needs more room for you to arrive, so you can sit down and feel the silence softly wrap itself around your shoulders, like a home that remembers. You don't need to be busy to belong. 7. When life feels lighter, there comes a moment, not dramatic, not loud, when you walk into your own home, and it feels lighter. Not because you bought something new, not because you cleaned everything, but because something within you has made room. The space is still the same. The floor, the walls, the light touching the windows, but something has shifted. You notice how your feet land softly on the wood. You hear the gentle hum of stillness in the air. You begin to move through the room, as if you're not trying to get anywhere. Just being here feels enough. This is what happens when Ma begins to live not only in your space, but in your days. You speak with more pauses. You eat with more breath. You listen without needing to reply, and without trying to be more productive. You begin to feel more present. The weight you've been carrying, the constant pressure to do, to be, to fill, softens. Because space is not just the absence of things. It is the presence of freedom. When you no longer rush through a walk, but feel your steps. When you no longer fill your weekend, but allow it to unfold. When you no longer fear the empty page, but rest in the stillness before a new word appears. This is not escape. It's return to the space that was always there, to the self that was waiting behind the noise. So if, in the next few days, you feel life slowing just a little, if your breath becomes more patient, if your eyes begin to notice the quiet things, then perhaps Ma has found you, and gently, without saying a word, is giving you permission to live more lightly. You've walked with me through silence today, not to arrive anywhere, but to remember how it feels to pause. Maybe you didn't learn anything new. Maybe that's the point. Because wisdom isn't always about knowing more. Sometimes it's about needing less. Less noise, less hurry, less grasping for what's next. And in that gentle letting go, you begin to feel space return. In your breath, in your schedule, in the corners of your home, that now seem to hold something more than objects. They hold presence. Maybe tonight, you'll sit by a window and let the light fade slowly. Or make tea and watch the steam rise without needing a reason. Not because someone told you to. Not because it's productive. But because you remembered how to be with yourself. No pressure. No fixing. Just being. And when the world grows loud again, as it surely will, perhaps something quiet inside you will remain. A stillness that doesn't resist the noise, but no longer depends on escaping it. Just enough space to return, to breath, to presence, to you. See you in the next video.